Hey everybody, Steve here in Cranston, Rhode Island with Kurt Deion.
Hello.
And one of the questions that I'm asked a lot is, how did I get started doing this? How did I get started visiting gravesites? Well, my story is, I was 10 years old. My grandmother took me and my brothers to Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, on a vacation, and we visited the Punch Bowl. It's a cemetery in a volcano. Have you been there, or have you heard of it?
No.
Are you familiar with it?
I heard of it a little bit.
Yeah, it's a national veterans cemetery, and I think it's called like the National, I don't know, the Pacific, I forget what it's called, but it's like the
National Cemetery of the Pacific.
Yeah, something like that. And that was my very first cemetery visit, and we actually took a tour. It was my very first cemetery tour, and I remember we visited the gravesite of Ernie Pyle. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I watched the movie not too long ago where Burgess Meredith played.
Okay, all right, so that was my first experience with cemeteries. I was 10 years old. I fell in love with cemeteries, and I've been visiting ever since. So I was hooked at the age of 10 just by accident. I never thought about going to a cemetery or never thought about cemetery tours at the age of 10. But Kurt has me beat. He started visiting cemeteries when he was 8 years old.
Yeah, so my first ones were actually graves that I think you're trying to see later today, the Adams Presidents and the First Ladies up in Quincy, Massachusetts, which, by the way, is pronounced with a Z sound, like a zoo or zipper. It's not Quincy.
And everybody
Quincy.
says Quincy, right?
Right, until you go there and you start interning there, like I did, and you get told on day 1 or 2 that you're pronouncing the name of the president and the city incorrectly.
And that's about, what, about an hour, hour and a half northeast of here.
Hour.
Yeah, toward Boston.
Right, south of Boston, but so those were my first ones. So my uncle lived there at the time, and I was 8 years old, and I'd been interested in presidents since I was 7. And Quincy has the Adams National Historical Park, so there's the birthplaces side by side of the Adams presidents, and there's also their family homestead of the old house at Peacefield, and there's a visitor center, so you go to the visitor center, purchase tickets, and the trolley tour will take you to the 3 different homes, and then neighboring that is the United First Parish Church, or the Church of the Presidents, it's nicknamed. And so my uncle said, hey, you know, why don't you come up to Quincy? So my sister and I went up there, and with my interest in presidents, he and his girlfriend at the time took us to the Adams houses with the National Historical Park and the Church of the Presidents. And so it was just really amazing for me to be reading about John and Abigail Adams and John Quincy and Louisa Catherine Adams, and in my books that I had at the time, and then there they are. You know, here's a signer of the Declaration of Independence, the first vice president, the second president.
And that's what I say a lot in my videos when I'm visiting historic, or just anyone famous or notable. It's like, it really brings it to life. All of a sudden, I mean, you can read about them or see them in a movie or watch a documentary, but then when you're actually there at their gravesite, it's, especially I think presidents, it really all of a sudden changes the whole way you feel about history and about these things that have happened, because you're actually there on that spot. So I started visiting cemeteries when I was 10. Kurt started at 8. And I'm curious, how about you guys? When did you start? Did any of you start before the age of 8 or 7? You were thinking about it at 7. And so share with us in the comments section. It'd be fun to know. And the other reason I wanted to meet with Kurt here today is because he inspired this road trip. Not on purpose, or I don't think he even realized that he inspired this trip, but I accidentally stumbled upon his website called
KurtzHistoricSites.com.
Oh, okay, KurtzHistoricSites.com, and I'll put the link underneath here. And his website has a list of all the presidents that he's visited, and he visited every single U.S. president by the age of what?
So at the time, Bush Sr. was alive when I had visited what previously was my last one, Lyndon Johnson. I was 17 years old. I was still a high school senior. I was on April vacation, 2 months out from graduation, and I visited Lyndon Johnson. Was my 38th and final at that time. So,
And
but now
now there's-
subsequently, George Bush has passed away, and I visited him and Barbara Bush in College Station, Texas. So.
But originally, it took you about 10 years, right?
A little less than that. So when I was 8, summer of 2003, visited the Adamses. Then after that, visited John F. Kennedy at Arlington National Cemetery, and then George Washington at Mount Vernon nearby. And then I had turned 9, and then in December, my father was channel surfing and came upon C-SPAN was re-airing a book talk about who's buried in Grant's tomb, a tour of presidential burial sites. It was written by Brian Lamb, the founder of C-SPAN, and the C-SPAN staff, and so he was doing this book talk with historian Richard Norton Smith, who inspired him to do his various travels. So it was a book talk. My father watched it. I didn't watch it, but it was at night, and he later told me about it. Hey, Richard Norton Smith and Brian Lamb separately did these grave quests to go see the presidents, and I was 9 years old, and I was thinking, I've seen 4 of them at this point, the Adamses, Kennedy, and Washington, and I'm like, I want to see the rest of it. So I looked up at my dad, and like, can we do that? He goes, do what? I go, visit every presidential gravesite. And so then that was the start. So from there, it was about 8.5 years from that point to get the remaining, 30 plus.
So you were realistic, you were like a normal person, and said, let's do this over a period of years. You went with your family on family vacations, and I remember you talking about how your sister was really kind of like miffed that, instead of going to the beach for vacation or Disneyland, you went to see dead presidents.
Yeah, right? was not a fan of. Which we have a lot of evidence of on videos where my father's like, Olivia, would you rather go to a Disney World or President Graves? And she's Disney World, and he goes, you're just not normal. But we all have our different interests, and I'm. They always tried to accommodate her, though, with other things that she liked. So it wasn't just
So you still
the
had to ride a
Kurt-centric
roller
trip.
coaster once in a while, or go to an amusement park, or
Yeah, right.
something other,
yeah,
a doll museum instead of going to a president's grave, right?
Right. Well, her main thing was, are there going to be dogs to pet at various places? But so that was generally easy to accommodate.
Well, Kurt did it the normal way. I decided after I saw his website, I thought, since I'm taking this road trip, and I planned this road trip back, I was going to take it in 2020, and then my mom had her stroke, and then what else happened in the world? The world closed down, and so I've been grounded for the last couple of years. So I finally, this April, I was able to finally say, okay, I'm going to take this road trip. And just a few months ago, when I discovered your website, I thought, well, I'd never really thought about visiting presidents' gravesites. In fact, I'd never visited a single president's gravesite, and this is my 5-year anniversary of my YouTube channel. And I think the reason is that there's only 2 presidents buried in California, and most of my cemetery trips are in and around California. Most of the presidents' gravesites are back here on the East Coast. And I thought, well, since I'm coming to the East Coast, I know I was going to go all the way to Maine. I thought, well, gosh, if he could do it, maybe I should do that too. And I thought, that'll be fun, that'll be easy. A 30-day road trip, 39 president gravesites. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, I'm only halfway through right now. I'm assuming I'm going to get to the others, on the way back. But I mean, they are everywhere. They're not easy to get to. I mean, if you're taking a road trip, I mean, it's zigzagging up and down. They're all over the place. And then the worst part is discovering that most of them, or at least half of them, have certain hours. They're like presidential libraries or national
historic
parks,
sites or parks.
And they'll close 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. And
I think the pandemic has affected that largely, where certain places
even Grant's tomb, didn't they close completely for a year or 2?
Yes, certain.
And some of them have
places
just started to open up again. So it's made it very difficult to get there at the right day, at the right time. And then also their times tend to be, like I was just looking up this morning on some of the presidents going back, one of them is closed 3 days a week, and when they are open, they're only open from like noon to 3. So 3 hours a day. So I have to really, really plan to do this. So anyway, I'm
the needle.
I'm the crazy one trying to do this in a 30-day road trip. So I wouldn't suggest that. I wouldn't, I would say do it more like Kurt. over time, you know, when you have time to get to different states and things. But
yeah, everybody, you know, has to go about it their different ways. So, you know, some situations just are better fits, and you know, for you, this is the better opportunity to do it. And for me, it was a different way.
Yeah.
Might be a combination or a middle ground for somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. But just beware. They're not as easy to visit as I was thinking they would be. I thought, oh yeah, since I'm going to be going back there, I'm going to be visiting lots of other graves anyway. I'll just see the presidents along the way, not realizing most of the presidents aren't buried in regular cemeteries with other people. At least half of them seem to be in their own cemeteries, in their own national historic areas, and so they're a little bit more difficult to find. But that makes it even more challenging and even more fun. If I'm able to do it by the time I get home, I'll definitely feel like I've accomplished something for sure. So Kurt, on your website, I think that's where I read it, you said that your mom gave you a book about presidents. Was that when you were 7 or 8? And was that before you visited the Adams or after?
So that was before. So I was 7, and I didn't have an interest in really history or definitely not presidents at that point, but there was a Scholastic book order form we got at a school, and for whatever reason, it's actually unknown to me, she ordered me the book So You Want to Be President by Judith St. George, and David Small was the illustrator. And I just really loved the illustrations, and I thought that the facts that they were putting in there were fascinating.
Really fun and interesting trivia stuff, right?
Right.
As well as just the history.
Right, so that really kick-started it for me, where that became a big interest, and then that led to my uncle the following year inviting me when I stayed up there with him. You know, my sister and I went to the presidential and first lady sites there for the Adamses. So that book led to the interest led to going to those sites, and then from there the C-SPAN book talk led to the full-on quest to visit all the presidents, which then evolved into including the vice presidents. And then I ran out of those, and my interest as far as gravesites has greatly expanded. So not being from California, I haven't had the opportunity to visit many graves there. I've visited only 5 California graves, actually, total. And I'm very envious of the ones that you've been able to see. So you're coming out to the East Coast and seeing, and going to the Midwest and seeing some that I've seen. And
well, it's interesting. It's so much more historic back here. I mean, just all the history and the presidents, and then in California, it tends to be more the celebrities, the movie stars, you know, the various TV stars and actors. But actually, we're going to go see a television star who's buried in this cemetery, and so that'll be on a separate video. We'll do that separately. So maybe, do you think your mom wanted you to grow up to become president, but instead you became a grave hunter, a president grave hunter?
You know what? At one point, I think she asked me if I wanted to know why she bought it, and I said no. So you know what? I'm just keeping the mystique. That's something.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm the rare historian who said, you know what? I'd rather not know. So because this is just how it.
It's nice how it's evolved. Yeah. So you became a history major in school, and you have a master's degree in history. And you said earlier that you really weren't even that interested in history before doing this. So that little book your mom gave you kind of sparked this whole interest, and everything kind of came from that. And then at what point did you decide you really wanted to be a history major?
When I was younger, there weren't many things I considered. You know, sometimes people go through the whole list of careers that they want to do, and when I was when I was younger, I was thinking of being a movie director, and then ever so briefly around 5th grade, I was considering being a baseball umpire until I saw some of the death threats that Don Dankinger got after he got an incorrect call in the 1985 World Series, so that put the kibosh on that pretty quickly. So then, from at least 6th grade on, I was thinking I want to do something in history, and I even have it was 6th or 7th grade. There's a certificate somewhere where it says that I was going to grow up to be a presidential historian. So
wow.
Yeah, and I like to think also that I've grown with it too. You know, again, I was and thank you, geese, for making noises.
Oh look, here they come. They're photobombing us.
Trying to get their revenge perhaps for that person who was whizzing through here earlier and almost hit one, which was not either of us though. So I like to think that also I've grown and expanded with it, and I've also come to realize as a historian and you know, I just like to think a person that even though, you know, a president is maybe the most famous politician in their era or something, they're not necessarily the most important. It's like every life contributes to history, and also not every president, you know, not to be political, but you know, I mean, people can think of presidents of any party or ideology, you know, disagree and whatnot, or oh, they might not have been that good in this area, or they might have been, you know, detrimental, you know, to this group or something. You know, look for, you know, all the different graves. So now I go to civil rights activists, and not, you know, some are better known than others. You know, I look after Hollywood people. You know, some of them have some sordid history and whatnot. So I like to go visit, you know, historical figures of all kinds now, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just kind of bring, you know, whatever the truth is, you know, to light. That's what it is, the good, the bad, or the ugly.
Okay, so I'm just curious, are you the youngest presidential historian, do you think?
No, there's definitely well, again, what's the line of when you can say that you're a historian? So maybe even when I was younger, here was my thing, I didn't like the term presidential history buff, even from when I was like 10.
Yeah.
10 years older on. My dad would always call me that, and for whatever reason I just never liked that term. So
and how about now? Do you still not like that term?
Well, now especially that I've got the degrees, I don't want to, you know, I've got a bachelor's and master's in history. I especially like to think I'm somewhat beyond that. So I like to say that because I specialized in public history, so history outside the classroom. So, you know, maybe working at a museum or doing a historic tour or something along those lines.
But historian's okay?
Oh yeah, you're right, but I'm saying was I don't know where the line is where then you can say, oh, now I have graduated to historian or something like that. But so now
I guess for most people, I mean, I guess just in general, most people would think, well, since you've been to every single presidential gravesite, and you also now have your 2 degrees, your master's degree and your bachelor's degree in history, I think you qualify as a presidential historian. What
I've got on my newly reordered business cards now is I'm putting public historian, and
I saw that on your coin.
I was specializing in presidents.
Yeah.
So whether or not I can say exactly a presidential historian yet, I'm not sure. Maybe I have to publish a straight history book or something at this point. But I like to say I'm a public historian at least, and that is my main area of expertise.
Now, do you have any idea how many other people have visited all the presidents' graves besides you?
No, I couldn't put a number on it, but I mean,
a few hundred?
There's definitely
more?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's definitely a bunch, and at this point, there are people younger than myself who are doing it. And I think people who have accomplished. You know, again, just the presidents, not the vice presidents. That's this whole other thing, and there's a tricky one. And then Walter Mondale was cremated, and we do not yet know definitively what will happen with it. His memorial in Minnesota was just last week, and his urn was there, but we don't know, will his urn be kept privately, ashes scattered? Will they be buried in a public place? So we do not yet know that. And then there's another one that's private, which is all in my talked about in my C-SPAN interview with actually Brian Lamb, the founder of C-SPAN, interviewed me back on the show Q&A in 2015.
And you have a link to that on your website, right?
Yes, and a great thing about C-SPAN is so they've been around since 1979, and I believe everything they've aired since 1989, I believe, is available on their website.
Oh, so it's on their website too.
So that's where it is on their website.
That's where the link came from. Okay, yeah, I watched that. That was very good.
So there's a bunch of people that do it.
Weed whacker. I've never done a video in a cemetery where someone didn't start a weed whacker or a lawnmower. So probably you too, right?
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And you're trying to, or airplanes flying overhead.
I don't mind the airplanes so much. In fact, sometimes I kind of like the little airplane noise, or I like the train whistles in the background, but the weed whackers and the lawnmowers are just, they're very irritating to me.
Well, when you're trying to specifically do the Mighty Mouse routine at the Andy Kaufman gravesite, and you're trying to get that Mighty Mouse theme music in there, then the airplane noise, you're not hoping for. But right, some general atmosphere otherwise might be good.
Yeah. All right, so there you have it. Everything you ever wanted to know about Kurt Deion, or at least in a 10-minute video.
Yeah, which might be all you want to know about me. That's perfectly fine. That might be too much.
So again, have any of you visited all the presidents' grave sites like Kurt? And like, hopefully by the time I think I'll wait to post this video until I see if I can make all the presidents' grave sites. I'm pretty sure I will be able to. Anyway, let us know if you've also visited all the presidents' grave sites.
And which one is your favorite?
Oh, yeah.
My personal favorite is James and Lucretia Garfield in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you, so why is that your favorite? And I think that's the one that's closed 3 days a week right now.
Oh yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to leave that ambiguous and let you find out for yourself.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that one. So far, I've visited so far half the president, a little over half, 21 I think. And the most impressive one I thought was, well, the two, Woodrow Wilson, just the location in that National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. That was so, I was just like in awe. I couldn't believe it. It was just so enormous.
Well, that's why that's where major funerals are. Cole and Pyle, you were there just a few days after Secretary Madeleine Albright's funeral was there.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was where Hillary and Bill Clinton were giving their speeches, right?
Yes, the first time I was there was June 12th, 2004, the very day after President Ronald Reagan's funeral was there. So, so the Fords, Carters, and Bushes, Clintons were there less than 24 hours before my father and I were back in 2004.
Wow.
So, the flowers were still there. Wreaths were still in the sanctuary.
That's pretty neat. So that really, I love that presidential final resting place. The other one was Grant's tomb, where I was the other day, and you were there last week for his bicentennial, 200th anniversary of his death.
Birth.
Oh, of his birth.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and so they had a big thing, and lots of presidential historians and presidential authors. They were all there with you, and so that was pretty neat, the president's grave. So anyway, we could probably both talk all day, especially me. So I think we're going to call it a day right now, but it was so nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice
thank you for sharing your story with us, and for inspiring me to make this trip to visit the president's grave sites. And
glad to cost you a lot of your time and money.
Oh yeah, a lot of both. But anyway, it's been fun. So until our next trip to the cemetery together, thanks for joining us and sharing the memories, everybody.
Bye.